The text came in at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. She was already in bed. Lights off. Lucas asleep beside her with one arm draped over his face the way he always did. The way she had once found endearing and now simply noticed. The way you notice the crack in the ceiling you've stopped bothering to fix. Her phone lit up the entire room. She picked it up out of habit. Squinted. Read the name on the screen. And something happened in her chest that she did not have a word for. Not yet. The message was from Diane Calloway's assistant. Short. Professional. Almost cold. Ms. Calloway is relocating to the New York headquarters permanently. Your contract with the Malibu residence will conclude at the end of the month. Thank you for your exceptional service. Mara read it once, then read it again, then put the phone face down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Lucas shifted beside her, mumbled something. Didn't wake up. She didn't move. Because here is the thing that Mara Vega could not explain to anyone, not to her sister, not to her best friend, not to the version of herself she presented to the world every single morning. She wasn't sad because she was losing a client. She was devastated because she was losing her. And she had spent 3 months pretending those were two different things. They weren't. They never had been. This is the story of how Mara figured that out. And what it cost her. And what it gave her back. Let's go back to the beginning, because the beginning matters. Mara Vega was 31 years old, organized in the way that only people who grew up in chaos learn to be, and very good at making spaces feel like home for other people. She had built a small cleaning and home management business out of nothing. Started with 2 clients in Pasadena, word spread. She got better clients, then better ones, until she had a roster of 12 households in the greater Los Angeles area. Doctors, architects, a retired film producer who collected taxidermy and never asked her to touch it, which she appreciated. She was not rich. She was stable. There is a difference, and Mara understood it the way only someone who had been neither could. She had a boyfriend named Lucas, who was handsome and kind, and worked in insurance, and made dinner on Thursdays, and remembered her coffee order, and loved her in the quiet, consistent way that people who have never been particularly broken tend to love. It was a good relationship. She told herself that often. It was a good relationship. She told herself that especially on the nights when she lay awake wondering why something that was good enough could feel, in certain lights, like a room with no windows. She met Diane Calloway on a Tuesday in January. The referral had come through a client in Brentwood who said, and this is the exact quote, "She's impossible, but she pays triple and the house is stunning." So. Mara took the address and drove up into the hills above Malibu and sat in her car for a moment looking at the house before she went inside. It was the kind of house that didn't apologize for itself. All glass and pale stone, perched on a cliff above the Pacific with the arrogance of something that had been built to outlast whoever lived in it. Inside it smelled like eucalyptus and expensive leather and something else she couldn't name. Salt, maybe. The ocean coming through every open window. Diane Calloway was on her second glass of wine when Mara arrived at 7 in the evening. Not drunk. Not exactly. But loose in the way that very controlled people get when they've decided to give themselves permission for one night. Hair down, which Mara would later learn was rare. Barefoot on the cold stone floor. Wearing a silk blouse she'd probably worn to a board meeting 12 hours earlier and hadn't changed out of because she forgot that other people changed clothes. She was 43. She had built a tech company from a pitch deck and a borrowed conference room into something that employed 800 people, and was currently in the middle of a very public, very hostile acquisition attempt that she was fighting with the focused ferocity of someone who did not know how to do anything else. She was also, and Mara noticed this immediately, and then immediately told herself she had not noticed it, extraordinarily beautiful. Not in a soft way, in a structural way. The kind of face that made you think of words like architecture. "You're the cleaning person," Diane said when Mara walked in. Not unkindly. Just directly, in the way of someone who had long ago stopped softening her sentences for strangers. Home manager, Mara said. Diane looked at her for a moment. Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. Fair enough, she said. Can I get you something to drink while I show you around? I'm working, Mara said. I know, Diane said. So am I. That should have been Mara's first indication that this was not going to be like her other clients. It wasn't. It was never going to be. The house was a disaster in the specific way of someone who was brilliant and completely indifferent to domestic maintenance. Books everywhere. Not decoratively. Actually everywhere, on every surface. Some of them open face down in ways that made Mara internally wince. A kitchen that had every high-end appliance, and no food except coffee and half a case of Côte du Rhône. A desk in the study covered in papers, organized in a system only Diane understood, and which Mara was told, very clearly on the first night, never to touch. Never, Diane said. Standing in the doorway of the study with her wine glass, watching Mara take inventory. Not even if it looks like a disaster. That's a working disaster. There's a difference. Understood, Mara said. Good. Diane looked at her again with that particular directness that Mara was already learning was simply how she looked at things she was trying to understand. You're very calm. I'm working, Mara said again. This time Diane did smile. Just briefly. Just enough. Right, she said. So you are. That was the beginning. The first month was just work. Mara came on Tuesdays and Fridays. Sometimes a Saturday if Diane was hosting something, which happened twice, and both times resulted in a level of aftermath that suggested the hosting had gotten significantly out of hand. She learned the house. She learned the rhythms of it, where the light came through in the morning and made the dust visible, which windows stuck, which floors needed a gentler product because the stone was older than it looked. She learned Diane's rhythms too, unavoidably. That's what happens when you spend enough hours inside someone's home. You learn them through their spaces. Diane worked from 4 a.m. until she couldn't anymore. Mara knew this because of the coffee cups. Never just one. Always a trail of them from the study to the kitchen to the terrace. She knew it from the papers that migrated through the house in patterns, from the way the couch cushions were arranged when Diane had fallen asleep sitting up versus when she'd managed to make it to the bedroom. She slept badly. She ate like someone who viewed food as logistically necessary rather than pleasurable. She had a sister in Portland she talked to on the phone sometimes, and Mara could always tell from the way Diane's voice changed in those conversations, slower, less armored, that it was the sister on the line. She was, underneath all that controlled competence, a little lonely. Mara noticed this the way she noticed everything in the houses she managed. Carefully, neutrally, and then filed it away. The second month, things shifted slightly. It happened in increments. Small things. The kind of things you can explain away one at a time, and only understand in aggregate, looking back. Diane started being home on Tuesdays when Mara arrived. Before, she was always at the office. Now she was at her desk, on calls, existing in the background of whatever Mara was doing. It shouldn't have changed anything. It changed everything. Not because anything happened. Nothing happened. It was just the awareness of her. That particular awareness of another person in a space that becomes its own kind of noise. One Tuesday, Diane was on a call that was clearly going badly. Mara was in the kitchen. She could hear the tone through the study door, clipped, tight, the specific flatness of someone exercising extreme restraint. When it ended, there was silence. Then the door opened, and Diane walked into the kitchen and stood at the counter without saying anything for a long moment. Mara kept working. "Do you know anything about acquisitions?" Diane asked finally. "No," Mara said. "Good." Diane poured herself a glass of water, drank half of it. I'm tired of talking to people who think they do. Mara didn't say anything. She was cleaning the inside of a cabinet. You're easy to be around, Diane said. Not as a compliment, exactly. More like an observation she was making aloud to see how it sounded. Mara paused, considered. You make it easy, she said. Which was true. Which she had not meant to say out loud. Diane looked at her for a moment with that direct, measuring look. Then she refilled her water and went back to her study. And Mara finished the cabinet and stood at the kitchen counter for a moment, looking out at the ocean, and told herself it was nothing. It was nothing. It kept being nothing, in the way of things that are quietly becoming something while you're busy insisting they aren't. They started talking more, not always, not every visit. But sometimes Diane would come into whatever room Mara was in and lean against the doorframe and say something about the acquisition, about a board member who was being deliberately obstructive, about a book she'd read at 3 a.m. because she couldn't sleep, and Mara would respond. And somehow 15 minutes would pass. Mara started noticing things she had not given herself permission to notice. The way Diane laughed, not often, but when she did, it was sudden and a little unguarded, like it surprised her too. The way she pushed her hair back when she was thinking. The way she said Mara's name at the beginning of a sentence, as if she had decided to use it specifically, deliberately, instead of just launching into whatever she wanted to say. Mara, like it was a choice she kept making. She mentioned Diane to Lucas one night, casually, as in, my client in Malibu has this incredible view, and she's in the middle of this whole corporate situation. It's interesting. Lucas said, that sounds stressful for her. Mara said, yeah, and that was all. And she lay in bed afterward, and could not explain why that exchange had felt, somehow, insufficient. The 3rd month was when she stopped being able to explain things away. It was a Friday evening. Mara was finishing up later than usual, because a window had needed weather stripping, and she'd gone to the hardware store in the middle of the day, and the whole schedule had shifted. Diane was on the terrace with a glass of wine, working on her laptop in the last hour of light. The sky was doing something extraordinary, the way it does in Malibu in late spring, all layered orange and violet over the water. Mara came out to let her know she was leaving. Diane looked up from the laptop. Stay for a minute, she said. It wasn't phrased as a request exactly, but it wasn't an order either. It was something in between. The way you talk to someone you've started to assume will want what you want. Mara should have said she had to get home. She sat down in the chair beside Diane. They watched the sunset for a while without talking. The ocean was doing its slow, indifferent thing below them. The wind came and went. I think I'm going to lose, Diane said finally, quietly, without looking at Mara. The acquisition. I think they're going to win. Mara didn't say, I'm sorry, or I'm sure you won't, or any of the other things people say when they don't know what to say. She'd learned that Diane hated those. What happens if they do? She asked. Diane was quiet for a moment. I built that company, she said. I built every part of it, and someone is going to take it and run it exactly wrong, and there's almost nothing I can do about it. A pause. That's what happens. Mara looked at her, at the line of her profile, at the way she held the wine glass without drinking from it, at the specific set of her jaw that meant she was holding more than she was saying. That sounds lonely, Mara said. Diane turned and looked at her. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Something happened in the space between them. Mara felt it the way you feel a change in air pressure. Not dramatic, just suddenly, undeniably present. Yeah, Diane said softly. It does. Mara drove home that night with both hands on the wheel and the radio off, and a feeling in her chest that she was absolutely not going to name. She was not going to name it. She had a good relationship. She had a life. She had a man at home who loved her and made dinner on Thursdays and was everything that made sense. She was not going to name it. Here is what she did instead of naming it. She cleaned things that didn't need cleaning. She reorganized the bathroom cabinet on a Tuesday when it was already organized. She deep-cleaned the outdoor furniture on a Friday when no one had sat on it in weeks. She found reasons to be in whatever room Diane was not in, and then found herself moving through the house listening for the specific sound of Diane on a call, or typing, or pouring coffee, and using those sounds to know where she was the way you use a compass to know which way is north. She called Lucas twice during the day, which she never did. He sounded pleased and slightly confused. She told her friend Gabby that her Malibu client was going through something with her company, and it was sad to watch. Gabby said, "You seem really invested in this." Mara said, "She's a person, Gabby. I just feel bad." Gabby said, "Okay," in the tone of voice that meant she had more thoughts she was choosing not to share. Mara did not ask what the other thoughts were. She already knew she didn't want them. The thing about pretending something isn't happening is that it takes energy. More energy, sometimes, than just letting it happen would have required. And Mara was pouring enormous amounts of energy into her pretending, and it was starting to show up in small ways. She was quieter at home. Lucas noticed, asked if she was okay.
Hello?
She said she was tired.
Is anyone home?
He made her tea. She looked at him while he made it. At his familiar hands, the way he moved comfortably around their kitchen, the way he was simply, uncomplainingly, there. And she felt something that she could only describe as guilt, which didn't quite make sense because she hadn't done anything. She hadn't done anything. One Friday in the 4th month, she arrived at the house to find the front door unlocked, and Diane not answering when she knocked. She went in. Found Diane asleep on the couch in the study, laptop on the cushion beside her, one shoe on and one off, out cold in the middle of the afternoon. Mara stood in the doorway. She should have made noise. Let Diane wake up naturally. That would have been the professional thing. Instead, she stood there for a moment, just looking. At the way Diane looked asleep. The difference from how she looked awake. All that contained, directed energy just gone. Her face slack and unguarded and, without all the armor, suddenly younger. Suddenly, unmistakably, tired. Mara felt something tear open somewhere behind her sternum. Quietly. Like cloth. She went and got a blanket from the closet and put it over Diane and went to do her work in the other rooms and did not allow herself to think about any of it. Diane woke up about 40 minutes later. Appeared in the hallway with the blanket around her shoulders and her hair completely wrecked and one of her rare expressions of genuine disorientation. "Did you—" she started. "You were cold," Mara said. She was buffing the kitchen floor. She didn't look up. The AC was on too high. A beat of silence. "Thank you," Diane said. Very quietly, in a register she didn't usually use. Mara looked up then, couldn't help it. Diane was looking at her with an expression that Mara had not seen on her before. Something open. Something that wasn't quite the usual directness. Wasn't quite the analytical study she usually turned on the world. Something that was more like recognition. Mara looked back down at the floor. "I'll turn the AC down before I leave," she said. And then they didn't talk about it. But everything was different after that. Quietly, incrementally, irreversibly different. The last normal day was a Tuesday 3 weeks later. Mara arrived and Diane was at the kitchen table, which was unusual. She worked at her desk or on calls but rarely just sat in the kitchen. She had coffee and the newspaper, actual physical newspaper, and she looked up when Mara came in with an expression that was simply uncomplicated, glad. Not, "The home manager is here." Just glad. "Morning," Diane said. "Morning," Mara said, and she thought, I am in serious trouble. Not because of what Diane had done. Diane hadn't done anything. Diane existed in her house, and spoke to Mara like she was a person worth speaking to, and had, at some point in the last 4 months, started looking at her like she was a specific person, not just a presence in the peripheral. And that was enough. That was more than enough. Mara was in serious trouble, and she understood with a clarity that felt almost like being punched, completely unprepared for any of it. She had been with Lucas for 3 years. She had a shared lease. She had a life with very specific dimensions that she had chosen, deliberately, because they made sense. This did not make sense. She didn't know what to do with something that didn't make sense, so she kept doing her job. She kept coming on Tuesdays and Fridays. She kept the house clean and the windows unstuck and the coffee cups migrated back to the kitchen. She kept having conversations with Diane that went longer than they should have, and meant more than she was willing to examine. And she kept lying in bed at night next to Lucas, staring at the ceiling, feeling the outline of something she couldn't name, pressing against the inside of her chest. Lucas asked her one night if she was happy. Just like that. Out of nowhere. Or maybe not out of nowhere. Maybe he had been watching her be somewhere else for months, and this was the first time he'd found the words for it. She turned and looked at him in the dark. He looked back. His face was open and a little scared, the way people look when they ask a question they're not sure they want the answer to. "I'm tired," she said. "Things have been busy." Lucas nodded. Let her turn back over. Went to sleep. Mara didn't. She lay there until 2 a.m. thinking about the question he'd asked and the answer she hadn't given. And somewhere around 2:15, she understood that the question and the answer had nothing to do with Lucas. Not really. They had to do with her, and with who she was becoming in the space of a house above the Pacific, in conversation with a woman who looked at her like she mattered specifically. Not generally. Specifically. She had never had that before. She had thought for 3 years that she didn't need it. But before we continue, if you've made it this far, it's because something in this story hit close to home. That feeling of living inside a life that fits perfectly on paper and still somehow leaves you awake at 2 a.m. Go ahead and hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second and it helps me keep bringing you stories like this one. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and turn on the bell so YouTube lets you know when a new story drops on this channel. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a situation where you had everything that was supposed to make you happy and still felt like something was missing? What did that feel like? Write it for me. I read every single one. And tell me, what city are you watching from? I'll leave you a heart. Now, back to Mara and Diane. The message came on a Thursday night, as you already know. But here is what you don't know yet. The day before it came, something happened that made it impossible. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Mara was not supposed to be at the house. She was between clients, ahead of schedule, driving back toward the freeway when she realized she had left her phone charger on the kitchen counter. She had a long evening ahead and she needed it. She turned back up the hill. She knocked. No answer. She had a key. It was part of the arrangement, and she let herself in. She heard music. Something old, something she didn't recognize coming from the terrace. She got her charger from the kitchen. She was going to leave. That was the plan. Instead, she walked to the terrace door. Diane was dancing, alone, eyes closed, moving in the specific, uninhibited way of someone who is absolutely certain they're not being watched. She wasn't good at it, technically. She didn't care. She was completely, utterly inside the music, inside the private joy of a person who has temporarily stopped managing everything and is just existing, moving, taking up space without calculating the cost of it. Mara stood in the doorway. She didn't make a sound. She should have. She should have knocked or cleared her throat or made her presence known in any of the normal ways. She stood there and watched Diane Calloway, who ran a company and fought acquisition attempts and rarely laughed and almost never stopped working, dance alone on a terrace above the Pacific with her eyes closed. And something inside Mara gave way. Not broke. Gave way. Like a door that has been locked from the inside and finally quietly opens. She must have made a sound. Or maybe Diane sensed something, that animal instinct we have when we're being observed. Because Diane opened her eyes. They looked at each other. The music kept going. Diane didn't look embarrassed. Or she did, briefly, and then something shifted in her face and it became something else. Something that looked more like a question. "Charger," Mara said. She held it up. Her voice was completely steady. She was very proud of that. "Right," Diane said. Neither of them moved for a moment. "I should," Mara started. "Do you want to stay for dinner?" Diane asked. Quickly, like she'd decided before she finished thinking it through. And this was different from before. From all the conversations, from the sunset on the terrace, from the blanket and the morning coffee and all of it. This was different because Diane's voice, when she asked it, had something in it that Mara had not heard before. Something tentative. Something that was asking more than what the words said. Something that knew. Mara looked at her. At this woman who had, over the course of 4 months, become the clearest part of Mara's week. Who she thought about on the days she wasn't here, and then told herself she wasn't thinking about. Who had, without trying, without meaning to, or maybe while meaning to, maybe while knowing exactly what she was doing, become the person Mara measured everything else against. "I can't," Mara said. She said it softly, not like a professional decline, like an acknowledgement. Like the word can't was doing a lot of work that won't and shouldn't, and I'm afraid of what happens next, couldn't quite accomplish. Diane heard it. She was too smart not to. She heard what it meant. She nodded. "Okay," she said. Mara left. She drove to the freeway and got halfway home and pulled off at a gas station and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes with her hands in her lap, doing nothing. Thinking nothing she was willing to admit to. Then she drove home to Lucas, made dinner with him, watched something on TV, went to bed. And at 11:47 p.m., her phone lit up. "Ms. Calloway is relocating to the New York headquarters permanently. Your contract with the Malibu residence will conclude at the end of the month." She read it in the dark beside the man who loved her, felt the floor drop out, understood, finally and completely, and without any more room for pretending otherwise, what she had been refusing to name for 4 months. You can avoid a thing for a long time. You can schedule around it, rationalize it, keep it at the edge of your peripheral vision where it can't quite be examined. But when the thing disappears, you discover its exact size by the shape it leaves behind. The shape it left behind was enormous. She went to the house on Friday. Last scheduled visit. She came to do her job. She would do her job. The house was half-packed. There were boxes in the study. Not her desk papers. Never those, but books and some things from the walls. A mover's label on a stack of things in the hallway. The house was becoming already just a space. The specific version of it that was Diane's was already starting to lift. Mara cleaned. She did the whole house, every room, thorough and methodical, the way she always did. Diane worked at her desk most of the morning. When she came into the kitchen at noon, she stopped in the doorway. They looked at each other. "You didn't have to come in person," Diane said. "For the last visit, I could have just mailed the final payment." "I know," Mara said. Diane looked at her for a long moment. "Mara," she said. Just her name. In that particular way she had of saying it. Like a choice. "Don't," Mara said. Quietly. Not unkindly. "Please." A beat. Diane closed her mouth. Mara looked at her hands. At the cloth she was holding, which she had stopped using. "I have a life," she said. "I have someone. I have things that work. Things I built." She looked up. You of all people understand that. Something moved across Diane's face. I do, she said. I'm not. Mara stopped, started again. I don't know what I am. I just know what I have. The distinction felt important. It felt honest. It also felt like the saddest thing she had ever said out loud. Diane stepped into the kitchen. She stopped a few feet away. Close enough that Mara could see everything in her face that she was choosing not to hide. And she was choosing not to hide a lot. I know, Diane said. I'm not asking you for anything. A pause. I just want you to know that this... She gestured slightly at the space between them. That this was real. For me. If that matters to you at all. Mara felt something in her throat that she refused to let become anything. It matters, she said. They stood in the kitchen of a house that was already becoming a past, and the ocean did its indifferent, eternal thing outside, and neither of them said anything else for a long moment. Then Mara finished her job, packed her supplies, walked through the house one last time in the way she always did, checking for things left undone. Everything was done. She picked up her bag. At the front door, Diane was waiting. Not strategically. She wasn't blocking the exit or making a moment of it. She was just there, in the way of someone who needed to witness the ending of something rather than let it happen without being present for it. Mara stopped. They were close. Not inappropriately. Just close. The way you stand with someone in a doorway when the geometry of leaving requires you to be near them for a moment. New York is good, Mara said finally. Inanely. Like a person who has run out of language and grabbed for something ordinary. It's fine, Diane said, something almost like a smile. I've been there before. You'll fight them there too. That's the plan. Mara nodded. She was looking at Diane's face, memorizing it in the specific, helpless way you memorize things you know you won't see again. The architecture of it, the line of her jaw, the way the afternoon light from the open door fell across her. She thought, I don't know what I would have done if she'd asked, if she'd actually asked. She thought, I think I know. She didn't say either of those things. Take care of yourself, Mara said. Actually take care of yourself. Eat things. Sleep sometimes. Diane laughed, that rare, brief, unguarded laugh. I'll try, she said. Mara shifted her bag on her shoulder. Signal of departure. Last moment before the world outside rearranged itself into something final. Goodbye, Diane. Goodbye, Mara. Neither of them moved for one more second. 1 second where something hung between them, fully formed and unspoken, visible to both of them, entirely without resolution. Then Mara walked out. She sat in her car at the bottom of the hill for a while. Not crying. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That felt like it would require arriving somewhere she hadn't arrived yet. Just sitting. Hands in her lap. Ocean visible in the rearview mirror, flat and silver in the afternoon light. She thought about Lucas, who would be home now, or soon, who would make dinner and ask about her day and love her in the steady, uncomplicated way that had always felt like enough. She thought about the woman upstairs in the house above the cliff, surrounded by half-packed boxes, already turning toward whatever came next. She thought about herself. About the question Lucas had asked in the dark that she hadn't answered. About 2 in the morning and ceilings and the shape of something enormous pressing from the inside out. She thought, I don't know what I am. And also, I think I need to find out. She didn't know what that meant yet. She didn't know what it would require or cost or look like from the other side. She didn't know if the finding out would break something she loved, or free something she'd been keeping locked for a long time. She didn't know if there was a version of her life where windows weren't such a relevant metaphor. She knew one thing. She knew that something had been real. That in a house above the Pacific, with a woman who said her name like a deliberate choice, something in her had been seen. Not the Mara who was stable and organized and good at building other people's homes. The other one. The one underneath that she had been so busy maintaining the surface she had almost forgotten was there. She had been seen. That was going to have to mean something. She just didn't know what yet. She started the car, pulled onto the highway, drove toward her life, with the particular electric uncertainty of someone who is not yet certain that the life she's driving toward is still going to fit. Some stories don't end, they open. Mara Vega drove away from a house on a cliff and didn't know yet who she was going to be on the other side of the knowing. She wasn't ready. She maybe wouldn't be ready for a while. And that's okay. Not every feeling arrives with instructions. Not every door opens the first time you notice it's unlocked. If this story touched something in you, something you've been circling for a while, something you haven't quite named yet, write, wait in the comments. That's how I know you stayed until the end. And if you want to keep feeling things with us, click on the video appearing on your screen right now. Another story is waiting for you. See you soon.